liberation down to the cell, liberation down to our bones, practicing that each day, having that clarity of what we are needing and what we are wanting. Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Borikén podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquest and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmín Hernández, creator of CucubaNación, artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Borikén. Welcome to another episode of the Rematriating Borikén podcast. This will probably close the streak that I've had going since November on episodes contemplating darkness, the abyss, light. This is clarity. And it is a closing of that reflection around those themes into the importance of physical sightedness, the importance of taking care of our eyes, the importance of staying with our eyes always open, especially in these times. Eyes wide open, always, both eyes, third eye, and moving also into questions around seeing what we believe, seeing through the illusions, and being very keen around our own sovereignty, our own personal sovereignty in an effort to move towards collective sovereignty. So welcome on this reflection on clarity, pre-recorded actually with the new moon, but now being shared with this full moon today, glorious moon in Leo, my sign. We're about to have the new moon in Aquarius, Lunar New Year. The podcast that will be going up for this moon is that on light, inspired and responding to La Trinchera de Ideas on Luz. And so this podcast would be on clarity for the full moon. I'm recording this on January 26th, 2025. So clarity, claridad, affirmation from the Gallo. Clarity is a response, a follow-up to the conversation on light. Prior to the Trinchera de Ideas that I had talked about on light, which is the Trinchera from the month of January, in November, I did a Trinchera de Ideas with a theme of abyss and darkness as this precursor, as this natural precursor to a conversation around light. Because before there is any perception of light, and in order, I would say, to perceive light, we must perceive darkness. So there was no better metaphor for this concept of darkness and light and clarity, and how those two, darkness and light, work symbiotically, and how they are both tools that we must master and balance in order to achieve sovereignty. It is how we work energetically. It is how everything in this earth works as these polar opposites, this magnetism between different extremes, different poles, darkness and light. And that is that my family was among about, it was estimated over 1,000 people showed up to the planetary alignment observation hosted by la Sociedad de Astronomía del Caribe in Pitaya, Cabo Rojo, which is known as being, I think, the darkest part of this island, if not one of the darkest parts of Borikén. And that is why they set up these observation events there. We have over the course of our years here, gone to various events of theirs, the first one being in El Faro de Rincón. And at that event, and that event was fabulous because there was even a DJ and there were like some huge projections of like NASA imagery of all the galaxies or some galaxies. I don't think anybody but God could show imagery of all the galaxies. Pues the other event we had gone to was at RUM at La Universidad de Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. And that event was beautiful because it was the only event that happened in the daytime to capture the crossing of the sun, the crossing of Mercury in front of the sun. And so, of course, we couldn't view it directly, but there were special filters seen in the telescope. And then there was a live of the event on a computer screen that they had available for folks. We've also gone to RUM to see eclipses. And then a few months ago, we went back to El Faro de Rincón where we saw the comet, which was insane. And then most recently in Cabo Rojo, we were able to see the planetary alignment, which I had long been following. I can identify with my eyes. I don't have a telescope. I don't own a telescope. We used to in Moca. But these planets today are very visible to the bare eye. And that is at least Venus. Venus is like the diva of the skies. Venus has been very present. And because it's so easy to find Venus as like the most bright object in the sky next to the moon, then it was easy to spot that there's been a little star next to Venus in these days. Now, I'm recording this a little bit before I will be sharing it. So by the time I share this around the full moon, with the theme of clarity and the full moon, these alignments, I don't know what the sky will look like. It might be different than it is today around right before the new moon as I record this. And so because Venus is so easy to spot, it has been easy to pick up on the fact that there's a more faint star next to Venus in close proximity to Venus, and that is not a star at all. That's actually Saturn. And then we have Mars, who is the beautiful, large orange star looking thing in the sky is actually Mars. Rises somewhere around the east, northeast por ahí, and sets. The other night we stepped outside just before dawn, and Homeboy was like gorgeously massive at the horizon. At the horizon to the west. The other one is, as I mentioned, Saturn, and then Jupiter. In the early evening, Jupiter has been largely straight ahead, right? Because they rise at different times, set at different times. So that's how we get this alignment where we see them in different points along the sky. What's also been very prominent in the sky right now is the Orion constellation, which the Orion's belt, what folks in Mexico would refer to as las Tres Marías. In Puerto Rico, le decimos los Tres Reyes, and that's been very much a fixture of my time in Puerto Rico. And so I always follow those stars. And what's beautiful about those stars is that they come into view in the night sky around December-ish, and they're really prominent because they would have already risen as it starts to get dark, as you're able to appreciate them in January, que es el mismo tiempo que Los Tres Reyes, el Día de los Reyes. And that is how I was able in 2017 to notice them for the first time. Not notice them for the first time, but to notice Rigel, Betelgeuse, some people say Betelgeuse, and Rigel. Betelgeuse is the red star. Rigel is the blue star. The first time I noticed those stars on either side of Orion's belt. So if Orion's belt is vertical, and instead of seeing it as a belt we would assume, or if we're thinking about como el cinturón de Orión, como se dice en español, un cinturón lo estamos percibiendo de una forma horizontal, right? So if you think of a belt as horizontal, these stars from our vantage point here are usually, I think in the north, I would see them more horizontal. Here, closer to the equator, I see them vertically. I don't know if that's accurate with regards to the position on the earth or with regards to our axis. Yo no sé qué influye sobre eso, but I usually see them vertical. So I see these three stars, one underneath the other. From my vantage point, I'm also seeing Betelgeuse and Rigel to either side. And that is how I saw them in January of 2017, shortly after the news of Oscar Lopez Rivera's release, which is interesting because now we are celebrating the release, a home release of Leonard Peltier, who is a Native American brother that has been in prison since the year I was born, which is a long ass time. My entire existence on this earth right now, this brother has been behind bars and he has now been released to like a home situation, which is actually how Oscar was also released in January. So I hope that this would be temporary for him. Oscar was released in January to like house arrest, and then in May was fully released. I think it was May 17, si no me equivoco. And so in January, when I first saw the stars, it was right after the news of Oscar Lopez, and Oscar Lopez Rivera's birthday is January 6th, Dia de los Tres Reyes, which is what inspired for me the mural that I painted for him in his hometown of San Sebastián, El Regalo de los Reyes, which includes a Julia de Burgos poem by the same title, because El Regalo de los Reyes fue la bandera, according to Julia. Above the image of Oscar Lopez appears Orion as Orion's belt and Betelgeuse and Rigel as a flag nebula, and to either side are the Cuban and Puerto Rican flags, because that's what I saw in the sky. To see a red star and a blue star, I saw these as emanating within the red and blue triangles of the Cuban and Puerto Rican flags, respectively. And so the colors of our flags are also the colors of oxygen and hydrogen, predominantly as seen in the sky, as seen in nebulas, as the colors that these gases tend to give off when they reflect the light of stars. I am constantly, as a spiritual being, as we all are, though some of us are at different levels or phases of that awareness, right? As it's meant to develop and unfold for each of us. I'm constantly seeking this mirroring between our experience here on Earth and that of the cosmos. And that is my way of pushing past what are these imposed confines of colonialism that seek to invisibilize us, condition us to believe that we are much smaller than we are. Yo hago como dice o decía mi abuelo, que era tirar tu pensamiento hacia el infinito. Throw your thought out into infinity, right? This expansive way of thinking, of being, and finding these similarities, these echoes between these two experiences is what allows me to embody who I am right now in this existence, while also being very aware and activated as my spirit self, which is a transcendent, expansive self, which is not a limited, constricted, reactionary self. ¿Entiende? So I come back to these experiences that I have had here. Now, I don't discover these experiences for myself with the planets. I start this in New York. New York is where I start to realize that those few estrellitas that I could see over Queens, where I was living at the time, were not estrellitas at all. They were Venus, they were Jupiter, and they were Mars mostly. I also started to develop my relationship with the full moon, the moon cycles, the moon phases. I had recently birthed at home, assisted by a midwife. They follow a lunar calendar. So now I'm more aware of cycles with regards to their connection to the moon. And so all of these things me nacen in Nueva York. So by the time I get to Puerto Rico, and the first place we lived in Aguada, we could step out of the front door at night and be hit baral with the Big Dipper smack in front of our faces because we were there during the summer. And then when we moved to Moca, we have this huge little like terraza on the side, and which is really like the techo of the downstairs back marquesina. And it was just left like this raw slab of concrete, which people tend to do as they build here, because the idea is that they could create extensions, right? That they could build other rooms if they need to. But for us, it was this huge raw slab of concrete with like a drop to the valle overboard. Moved there with two kids, our kids who were 2 and 5 at the time of our move. So we had to have it fenced in. This isn't like New York where you go in and you start making demands on landlords. Puerto Rico does not function that way. Like, you have to rent stuff as is, and you need something there, you're going to have to be prepared to put it yourself. Y así fue. We put a fence in, and at night we would go out there, lay down, and look at the stars. And that is how I build this connection to the stars. So we got to see, with this planetary alignment, we were able to see whatever was up there, but we were able to see through these crazy telescopes they had. First was Jupiter, which left us all spellbound because you could see it with such clarity. The theme of today is clarity. You could perceive its cream color and orangey bands. And then, para colmo, you could also see above this huge mass that is Jupiter, a little white sparkling circle above it, which was one of its Galilean moons. Okay, crazy shit, Holmes. And then the man who was there was like next to that telescope. Along each telescope is like a different person, esta Sociedad de Astronomía. And he was like, oh, van a ver una lucecita blanca arriba, esa es una de sus lunas, y van a ver un puntito negro sobre el planeta, que es la sombra que está tirando otra luna. And sure enough, I look and I see the band and I see the sparkly little diamond of a moon on top. And then I see the little black dot that is the shadow being cast from another one of its moons. And it was just like, oh my God, oh my God. Then we move over to the next line, wait to see through the next telescope. I had read that Venus was ridiculous in the sky. She was like, everybody, I'm here, bitches. Look at me. Brightest thing, super spectacular. And I had read that Venus was a crescent, but we can't see this with the bare eye. So when I look at Homegirl in the telescope, it looked like a crescent moon. When you see the crescent like bulging down with the two puntitas facing up, like a little bowl or something. But it was like if the moon were made of diamonds. That's how ridiculously gorgeous Venus was. And the rest of her just like dark and like lush. And it was just magical. If all of this weren't enough, when we get to this finca in Pitaya, in Cabo Rojo, we pull in, we park the car. We were instructed you couldn't have cell phones, you can have like lights or linternas, turn down, be very respectful of your headlights coming in. And folks were told to bring red linternas because red as a wave of light, I discussed this in the last podcast around light, it's a more gentle ray for our retinas in the dark at night. And so we did happen to have two linternas that were red. So we're like trying to get our stuff together. We have the trunk popped open, trying to pull out the linternas, pack this little book bag that we're going to take in, get our beach chairs. And then we hear our oldest son like, look, 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 look. And when we turn around, there is a massive meteor shooting through the sky like a straight fireball with a tail of turquoise, which is mommy's favorite color, by the way, flying across the sky. And I'm like, no, stop the madness. En serio. Like, here we are coming to an observation event And this is when Borikén is like, yo, let me throw you the VIP special, right? Huacate, meteor. Everybody in that area just like parking their cars and getting ready to go. It was like a gasp, like a collective gasp. That was a whole moment of silence and a deep breath for the magnificence that is our cosmos, for the magnificence of this earth, for the magnificence of this archipelago, for the magnificence of this island, for the magnificence that are we as a people. Because clarity means that for all the ill shenanigans happening in this world and to the north in the US and at El Capitolio in San Juan, there were 1,000 of us at this one spot, and there were others of us distributed throughout this island and throughout the world, looking up at the cosmos and connecting to it and recognizing that we are so much beyond this bullshit and seeking that out and seeking the expansiveness and sharing it with our children and saying, ya no estamos aquí para esta mierda. Mientras ustedes están ahí jodiendo y jodiendo a otro, we're seeking some other greater truth. As we're walking down this dirt path to this finca, I am explaining to my children the reason why we're not allowed to bring these lights is we got to respect light contamination, something that I also talked about in the last podcast episode on light, because it's crucial to the concept of bioluminescence. But more to respect in this context, if you're going to observe stars, is to respect our retinas and the rods of our retinas, the rhodopsin that allows us to view through darkness. We have entered collectively a moment of intense darkness. We must cultivate further because we've lost it and we're losing it. I, as an eye patient, lost it almost fully during the pandemic as my eyes started to go dark, as I had to have an emergency surgery, as I was brutally, as an artist, as a writer, wakened up to the reality of my retinas and my physical sightedness, and how it was now time to protect it. The more we closed in during the pandemic, nos encerramos sin luz with these devices up in our faces. Clarity requires us to give our eyes the privilege to see through darkness, to activate and not lose that capacity to be immersed in darkness so that our eyes adjust and we're able to see through darkness. The more we continue to depend and spend too much time on our devices, the less time we spend outdoors in natural sunlight. This is affecting our eyes. This is creating a national epidemic of myopia, if it is to be considered an epidemic. I think so, because I don't think that people recognize the gift and the privilege of physical sightedness until it is somehow threatened. Clarity is allowing our eyes the privilege to see through natural light and to see in distances. If there is a phone before your face constantly, if you're at the computer constantly, writing constantly, doing things in close range, you are not fostering, developing, nurturing your eyes with that far off vision. And your eyes need to have the power to do both. See in light, see in darkness, see close, see far. We and our children, especially when they're trapped in a school for like 8 hours and not let out, maybe because I grew up in the cold, right? In those cold months in Brooklyn, they would stick us in that schoolyard, and that schoolyard was sandwiched between the brick school and another nearby brick wall. There was barely any sky to be seen. There was not one tree to be seen. And a lot of kids come out of that school after spending how many hours there y se meten en otro after school. Y ya cuando llegan para la casa ya están en la oscuridad. And all this is wreaking havoc on our eyes. And all of this that our eyes do and how they work, and the cones that see all the colors of the spectrum of visible light, how we see in daylight, these are all physical metaphors, visual metaphors for how we are to transcend energetically. The ability to see and navigate through darkness and all the shit show that we're witnessing and living and being exposed to and that is being imposed on us right now. And the capacity to see beyond it. The capacity to envision something better. Another affirmation from another Gallo. The capacity to imagine and see not just what they're doing to us, but what we deserve, what we're wanting, what we're needing. And be so intimately connected to that vision that we are more able to manifest it into something tangible, something we deserve to immerse ourselves in. This morning I said to my husband, I'm still on a high from like all these planets. Like, how could you be pissed? In the last episode, I was like, how could you be angry? Like, I hear all these birds, chirping and conversating, like we used to say in Brooklyn, right? How could you be angry? How could you be in a slump? Like, birds be singing all the time, all around you. And then it's kind of like, I just saw, like, I had a whole canopy of all these planets. Like, how am I supposed to play small? I just saw a moon over Jupiter homes. How am I supposed to act as small as they want me to be? How privileged are we to witness these things in the middle of darkness, in the middle of a storm, a whole storm brewing, and all kinds of storms. You got storms, political storms, firestorms, all kinds of storms. And then the cosmos is like, yo, look up. Look up. Look up. Look up. Because if you stay with your face buried in that device, leyendo post, después de post, esta mierda, we're going to fall into despair. We're going to fall into paralysis and inaction. Look up. That's that movie. That's that movie, that conspiracy theory movie that nobody wanted to believe anything that was happening. That movie is like coming to life right now with these people here, especially, that do support this dude. I need to say that, right? Like, on my platforms, whether it be Instagram and Facebook, and that's a whole other story about our relationship with Meta and our relationship with these things, where there's so many mechanisms and this fascination with social media. Entonces vino la pandemia y todo el mundo como que adicto a esto porque era lo único que teníamos next to Zoom. And so it's like, okay, so all of this going on and we're expected to organize within your structures and have our conversations and develop our context under your supervision. Serious moment for reconsideration. That's a whole other conversation that very much needs to be had and that very much should be happening everywhere, even if it's just quietly within our own selves right now. But going back to my point, is that how I have functioned with my platforms over the years is that I never use my platforms to visibilize these fools. Or if you did something offensive to Puerto Rico, it is very unlikely that your face will have the privilege of gracing my space on any platform. I center our people. I center us because I know what it feels to be invisibilized and silenced. And so if I have any opportunity to share anything, I'm going to give that space to our people. And there might be moments that I'll vent about something and maybe I'll make a little comment here and there, but very unlikely, very rare. Am I going to share that image? I'm going to share a video. I'm going to say what happened. It's not that I ignore. It's not that I'm not paying attention. It's not that I'm only focused on lo bueno. I see it all. This issue of seeing through darkness and seeing through light and seeing everything, that is like my full-time job. I see it all. But I am very strategic about what I invest my precious breath on. And I'm very strategic even on what I invest my precious energy on. So it gets to a point that navigating darkness means that you have to have selective vision and selective hearing. Because all of this colonial chatter is designed a desviarnos y distraernos so that we can't get to what we're supposed to be doing. And I lived like that for a long time. For a long time, I lived like that. Like, tú le das, yo le doy. Hicieron esto, tenemos que hacer aquello. Mira, ¿viste lo que hicieron? We have to do this. And these days, as I start to live out the smaller half of my life, then I recognize that I ain't got time to be playing like that no more. I think that that's a thing of youth. And we have the energy to do it all. And then at a certain point in life, you recognize that time is finite and precious, and you have to get more strategic about it. You also recognize that energy is finite and precious, and you have to be strategic about where you're going to invest it. And I choose to make that our people in our spaces. Clarity is being clear on our mission here and working towards it, because these enemies, these opponents, they're working all the time in all ways, and they have all sorts of resources to push their mission forward. And that's why we can't be giving them any of our time, energy, resources, opportunities, or working in any way to advance their cause. Their cause is doing just fine, in fact. What is ours? How are we working and investing our time, attention, and energy? And how are we also engaged in self-care and rest to ensure that we have the wellness and the longevity and the balance and stability, the acute awareness, the consciousness, the sight, the capacity to further our cause, work on our mission and our purpose. Darkness and light, this is where they get balanced. We also have the same way we must master and create a balance and harmony between darkness and light in the world as we see, as we perceive, as we move through it, is the importance to see these within us. How does darkness live in us? What are those fears? What are those doubts? What are those insecurities? What are those shortcomings that live in us, or that sometimes come to dominate and govern us? These things that we consider deficiencies. And for every deficiency that we perceive, which is usually conditioned by some outside thing that we've been caused and forced to believe, that may not even be true. For everything that we perceive as a weakness in us, there may be our mirror, our reflection in our families, in the collective, that can offer that strength. And then there are always strengths in us that we are offering so that we create, that we supplement each other, we complete in the work. Because I don't believe in that idea, like when they say, oh, he completes me, like a relationship with my other half, mi media manzana. No, I don't believe that. I believe that I'm a whole person and my partner is a whole person. My husband's a whole person. And together we come together and we complement each other. So I shouldn't say supplement. I believe it's complement. There are certain things that my husband is more keen on picking up on that my body is not programmed to really care about, right? And vice versa. And then together we're a team, and that is how it works in the collective. They're not deficiencies at all. It's that we're not meant to be whole in the way that we're perfect as everything, because at the end of the day, we're human. We have our strengths, we have our talents, we have our gifts, we have our skills. And our job is to know them and master them so we can know where to put our attention. Because part of the darkness and part of this idea of servitude and overproductivity and working is folks wanting to put us where they need us. And we have to know ourselves well enough to say, is this where I belong? And is my contribution most effective here? Or am I being forced to serve in ways that don't come naturally to me? Am I being forced into some box that I don't fit in? That's another way that sovereignty comes into question. Sovereignty is being able to move effectively and efficiently because we are so familiar with what is ours and how we exist and how we are built. Like those dinoflagellates that glow in our bioluminescent bays, we must be familiar with our favorable conditions. What conditions are favorable to us so that we may flourish, so that we may excel? And what conditions am I being thrust into that are unfavorable? Do I know my triggers? Do I know them well enough to say, this right here is some bullshit and I can't be here? Thank you very much. This was nice. I gotta go. That is sovereignty. A lot of us speak to sovereignty politically and what Puerto Rico needs because it's so much easier to speak for a place than it is to advocate for what we ourselves are needing and wanting. And the thing is that if we cannot navigate these things in our own personal lives and our own personal relationships and how we show up in spaces and at work and what work are we doing and whose work and for whom and for what and how, then how can we build this collectively to build nationhood or to build just the collective of a people working in the most harmonious way possible? And that's why in the past we had decolonization happening and then resulting in civil wars and just violence and other crazy shit. That is the idea of being decolonial and going beyond political decolonization to addressing all the ways that colonization has seeped into our skin, into our blood, into our bones, so that we police ourselves, police our own children, police each other. Liberation down to the cell, liberation down to our bones, practicing that each day, having that clarity of what we are needing and what we are wanting. And it's not to say that that's going to be clear always, but the clarity that we need to get there. So doing the work every day to just intimately go within and get to know that a little more each day. No es que tú lo tienes que saber todo at like 25 or 35 or 45, but at least know at 45 a good share of a deal more than you knew at 25. Let every day be a little more, not to rest on past laurels, past achievements, But every day, the work in progress, the clarity to see beyond, the clarity to keep the focus on what we're here to do, what our heart dictates that we're here to do, versus working and giving permission to people to do what they want with us and of us because they gave us money, they gave a grant, they gave us a job. Know what is permissible to us. Know what is not permissible. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Rematriating Borikén podcast. You know, my life is about bringing the light, bringing the light through darkness, especially. So thank you for those who have entertained and zoomed in and tuned in and dissected this whole concept of light, darkness, abyss, clarity with me over the course of several episodes. Future episodes will circle back to the interviews and feature more voices. So I appreciate you going on this organic ride with me and listening in. More information can be found on rematriatingborikén.com. That's rematriating with an M and Borikén with K-E-N. I post new episodes around the new and full moons. Maybe some surprises in between. Thanks for tuning in. Stay clear. Lots of clarity. Head up in these times with your heart grounded, centered, always in light. This is Yasmín.